Welcome back to the Wisdom of the Philosopher series. Today we're taking a look at Plato's Phaedrus. This was a text you asked us to explore, and our goal is really to unpack its core ideas, see what makes it tick.
Exactly. And we have the full dialogue right here. Plato's Phaedrus. It's dense, isn't it? Covers so much ground, love, rhetoric, the power of speech versus writing. We'll try and trace Plato's thinking through it.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Phaedrus is all excited about this speech by Lysias. What's the big idea there? What got him so fired up?
Right. Phaedrus is completely taken with Lysias's argument that basically you're better off favoring someone who isn't in love with you over someone who is.
That sounds counterintuitive. What were Lysias's reasons?
Well, they're quite pragmatic, really. The non-lover is supposedly more rational, less intense, more agreeable over the long haul, less likely to be jealous or suspicious or hurtful.
Okay.
And less boastful, apparently, less all-consuming. Lysias even says there are simply more non-lovers available. It's a very calculated perspective on relationships.
So a practical, maybe even cynical take. How does Socrates react when Phaedrus presents this? Does he jump straight into tearing their argument apart?
No, interestingly, not really. His first comments aren't about the content at all. He focuses on the style, the rhetoric.
The form over the substance initially.
Exactly. He mentions it feels a bit repetitive, maybe a bit rushed. Like Lysias was more concerned with showing off than crafting a truly sound argument. Socrates actually suggests, almost casually, that he could probably whip up a better speech on the very same topic.
And knowing Socrates, he probably could. So does he? Does he give his own version?
He does. He delivers his first speech. But here's the twist.
Yeah.
He argues from the perspective of the non-lover, just like Lysias.
Okay, so he's sort of demonstrating how it should be argued. What's the core of his initial speech then?
He starts by saying, look, if we're going to compare the lover and the non-lover, we first need to actually define love, understand its nature, its power.
Makes sense. Lay the groundwork.
Right. And then he introduces this idea of two competing forces within us.
Yeah.
There's reason, the better part, and then there's desire, the lower part, always in conflict.
It's internal battle. We see this a lot in philosophy. How does he connect it to love specifically?
Well, he says when reason wins out, that leads to temperance, self-control, good stuff. But when desire takes over, that's intemperance, excess, gluttony, drunkenness, all those things.
Right.
And he then defines love, in this speech at least, as the strongest of the irrational desires, the one specifically drawn towards physical beauty. So in this view, love is driven by that lower desiring part of us.
So initially, Socrates seems to almost agree with Lysias's premise, framing love as this irrational, potentially problematic force. But that's not his final word, is it? There's a famous interruption.
Not at all. That's just the setup. Phaedrus notes that Socrates suddenly stops, feels this kind of divine sign, an oracular sign is the phrase, a warning.
A warning? About what?
That he's basically been bad-mouthing love, Eros, a god. And he needs to atone, to offer a palinode, a retraction or recantation. This leads to his second, much more famous speech.
The palinode. And this one is completely different, I take it.
Oh, completely. It's a total reversal. He goes from criticizing love as irrational desire to actually glorifying certain kinds of madness.
Glorifying madness? That sounds, mad. How does he justify that?
He argues that not all madness is bad. Some forms are actually divine gifts. He outlines 4 types.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, there's the madness of prophecy, like the Oracle at Delphi. He even points out the link between the Greek words mantic, prophecy, and maniche, madness.
Interesting connection.
Second, there's the madness associated with ritual purification, the mysteries that heal or cleanse the soul. Third is the madness of the poet, the inspiration from the muses. He suggests you can't even be a real poet without it.
Right, poetic frenzy.
And the fourth, the greatest kind of divine madness, according to this speech, is love. But understanding this kind of love, he says, requires understanding the soul itself. The key point is that this divine madness can be a blessing, sometimes superior to ordinary sanity.
So to grasp love's divine madness, we need Plato's theory of the soul. What does he tell us about it here?
Well, first off, he argues that all soul is immortal. It's the source of its own motion and therefore the source of all motion. It's uncreated and indestructible.
The principle of life itself?
Precisely. And then he gives us that amazing image. The soul as a charioteer driving 2 winged horses.
Yes, the famous chariot allegory.
Right. For the gods, the charioteer and both horses are good, noble, working perfect harmony. But for human souls, it's more complicated. The charioteer represents reason, but one horse is noble and aspires upwards towards the divine.
And the other?
The other horse is unruly, Mortal, difficult, represents our base desires, constantly trying to pull the chariot down towards the earth.
What a constant struggle then.
Yep.
What about the wings? What's their purpose?
The wings are crucial. They represent the soul's natural desire and ability to ascend, to fly upwards towards the heavens, towards the realm of the forms, true beauty, wisdom, goodness. That's where the soul finds its proper nourishment.
So the soul wants to see these higher realities.
Absolutely. Plato describes this incredible heavenly procession led by Zeus, where the souls follow the gods, trying to get a glimpse of what lies beyond heaven, this realm of pure, unchanging reality, the true being.
But that difficult horse makes it hard, I imagine.
Extremely hard. That mortal steed, drawn by earthly things, disrupts the journey, makes it difficult for the charioteer to control the pair, hindering the soul's vision of that essence, formless, colorless, intangible, which only the mind, the charioteer, can perceive.
And this realm contains the ultimate truths.
Yes, justice itself, temperance itself, knowledge itself, not knowledge of things, but the absolute essence of knowledge. That's what nourishes the divine mind and what our souls yearn for.
How does the success or lack of success in seeing these truths affect our lives?
Plato suggests it determines our destiny, really. The souls that manage to see the most truth are reincarnated into the highest forms of human life. Philosophers, lovers of beauty, maybe artists or musicians.
And those who see less.
They fall into lower stations, step by step.
Mm.
A king, a statesman, a businessman, an athlete, a physician, all the way down to a sophist or demagogue. And finally, the lowest is the tyrant, the soul that saw the least truth.
Wow, quite a hierarchy. And the goal is to regain the wings.
Exactly. Through philosophical living, through the pursuit of tree love over many lifetimes, Plato speaks of thousands of years, the soul can gradually regrow its wings and eventually escape the cycle of rebirth.
Okay, so how does earthly experience, particularly beauty, connect back to this journey? You mentioned love is key.
Right. When a soul, especially one that had a good glimpse of true beauty of the divine realm, encounters physical beauty here on earth, it acts as a trigger, a reminder. Yes, a form of recollection and amnesis. It sparks a memory of that higher beauty. This causes a kind of, disturbance, a longing, a yearning for that divine realm again. This is why the lover might seem mad to others who don't feel that connection.
Because beauty is the most easily perceived form here on earth.
That's Plato's point. We can see reflections of beauty much more clearly than we can see reflections of justice or temperance. So beauty has this unique power to jolt the soul, to remind it of its origins.
So that intense feeling, the madness of love, is actually the soul remembering and longing for the divine.
In its highest form, yes. When someone who is capable of this recollection sees godlike beauty in another person, they feel awe, reverence. It literally reawakens the stumps of their soul's wings, causing this strange mixture of pain and pleasure like teething, Plato says. The wings are trying to grow back.
That's quite a description, the birth pangs of the soul's wings.
Isn't it? And the lover then often neglects everything else, forgets worldly concerns. The beloved becomes almost like a mirror, reflecting the divine, and a kind of physician, healing the soul's pain. Plato even mentions the gods call Eros Teros, the winged one, because of this power to regrow the soul's wings.
Does this explain why we fall for certain people?
Plato suggests it does. He says that in that heavenly procession, each soul followed a particular god. Zeus, Hera, Apollo, Ares, and so on. And when they seek love on earth, they tend to look for someone whose nature reflects the god they followed. They try to cultivate those divine qualities in themselves and in their beloved.
Fascinating. And the chariot metaphor comes back here too, doesn't it? When the lover actually encounters the beloved.
Yes, it vividly portrays the inner turmoil. The sight of the beloved stuns the charioteer. Reason. The noble horse is filled with reverence and holds back. But the unruly horse, it surges forward, demanding pleasure, causing chaos.
So how is that resolved? How can love become noble?
Through struggle and discipline. The charioteer, with the help of the noble horse, has to violently restrain the unruly one again and again. Over time, the bad horse can be tamed, humbled, learning to follow reason's guidance.
And if both lovers achieve this kind of self-mastery,
then, Plato suggests, they can share a truly beautiful, harmonious life based on philosophy and mutual respect. They help each other grow their wings, achieve those heavenly victories, and are promised to return to the divine realm together after death. It's a very idealized picture of love.
a very philosophical love. Okay, so after this incredibly deep dive into love, madness, and the soul, the dialogue shifts gears somewhat back towards rhetoric. How does he use those earlier speeches now?
Right, he circles back. Those first two speeches, Lysias's and Socrates' initial ironic one become case studies for analyzing rhetoric, the art of speaking.
What's his main point of analysis?
He starts by distinguishing between subjects where people generally agree, like iron or silver, and subjects that are highly debatable, like justice, goodness, or love. Rhetoric is mostly concerned with the debatable ones, obviously.
Because that's where persuasion is needed.
Exactly, and he criticizes Lysias's speech for lacking proper definition. Lysias never really defined love, and for lacking logical order, it just sort of jumps around.
Compared to Socrates' second speech.
Compared especially to his second inspired speech, which, Socrates argues, demonstrated two key principles. Synthesis, bringing scattered particulars under a single definition, like defining love, and analysis, dividing that concept logically into its natural parts, like the different kinds of madness.
And these two principles, synthesis and analysis, he says, belong to
Dialectic, the true philosophical method of inquiry. Not rhetoric, at least not rhetoric as it was commonly taught in practice, which focused more on stylistic tricks and emotional appeals.
So if you take away definition and logical structure, rhetoric is just a collection of techniques.
Pretty much. Socrates rather amusingly lists all the technical terms the rhetoric teachers used, prologues, narratives, proofs, probabilities, summaries, and suggests that without the foundation of dialectic, it's just parts, not a coherent art. It's like knowing how to apply medicines, but not knowing when or why. That doesn't make you a doctor.
So what is true rhetoric for Plato, then?
True rhetoric, the kind worthy of a philosopher, absolutely requires knowledge of the truth. You have to know what you're talking about. And you also need to understand the nature of the soul, different kinds of souls, so you can adapt your speech effectively to persuade or teach different people.
Knowledge of truth and knowledge of psychology, essentially.
Yes, and he strongly favors the spoken word, the living word, over the written word.
Why the preference for speech?
He argues that genuine understanding the principles of justice, goodness, truth is like a living thing, graven in the soul. It's dynamic, it can defend itself, it knows when to speak and when to be silent. Spoken dialogue helps cultivate this inner understanding.
And writing.
Writing is more like an image, a shadow of that living knowledge. It's fixed. It can't answer questions. It can't adapt to its audience. It can circulate everywhere, falling into the hands of people who might misunderstand it.
Which brings us to that famous myth about the invention of writing, doesn't it? Thuth and Themis.
Exactly. The myth perfectly illustrates his concerns. Thuth, the inventor god, presents writing to King Themis of Egypt, claiming it's a potion for memory and wisdom.
But the king isn't convinced.
Not at all. Themis delivers this sharp critique. He says writing won't improve memory. It will cause forgetfulness because people will rely on external marks instead of internal recall.
Ouch.
And worse, he says, it will give people the appearance of wisdom without the reality. They'll hear many things without proper instruction, think they're knowledgeable, but actually be ignorant and difficult to get along with.
That sounds remarkably relevant today, actually. Information overload without deep understanding.
Doesn't it just? Plato, through Themis, is worried about passive reception versus active internalized learning. He contrasts the ancient wisdom that valued the truth, regardless of who said it, with the newer tendency, even then, to focus on the speaker's reputation or origin.
So writing is like a painting looks alive, but is silent if questioned.
That's the analogy Socrates uses. Writing can't defend itself or explain itself further. The living word, the knowledge within the soul, can. It's the legitimate offspring of understanding. The written word is just an image, a kind of play.
He uses another analogy, too, about farming.
Yes, the sensible farmer plants seeds in good soil, expecting a real harvest over time. He wouldn't seriously plant seeds in a temporary garden of Adonis, just for a festival show that withers quickly. Writing, for Plato, is a bit like that festival garden, potentially beautiful, useful for reminding oneself, but not the place for cultivating deep, lasting knowledge. That happens through dialectic, through conversation, through sowing seeds in the soul.
So wrapping this up, what constitutes the true art of rhetoric, the true philosopher, according to the Phaedrus?
Okay, so it boils down to this. True art requires knowing the truth of your subject. You need to be able to define it, divide it logically, dialectic. You need to understand the soul, its different types. And then you need to structure your speech to match the soul you're addressing, to effectively teach or persuade towards the good.
And this is primarily achieved through speech.
The highest form is achieved through planting these true principles, justice, goodness, beauty, directly into a receptive soul through living dialogue. That knowledge, graven in the soul, is the philosopher's true writing, their legitimate child. Written compositions are secondary, perhaps reminders or amusements.
And the final message, say, to someone like Lysias?
The message is clear. If you compose speeches or laws or poems, and you know the truth behind them, can defend them dialectically, and understand their limitations compared to living knowledge, then you might deserve the name philosopher. If you're just playing with words without knowing the truth, well, you're just a speechwriter, or a poet, or a legislator, not a lover of wisdom. And, well, that brings us towards the end of our journey through Plato's Phaedrus for this installment of the Wisdom of the Philosopher series. It's quite a ride, isn't it? Hopefully, walking through it has given you some valuable things to think about.
Absolutely. So much in there. What parts really stood out to you listening along? Did Plato's ideas about love or maybe his critique of rhetoric and writing resonate with your own experiences today? We'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts in the comments section.
Yeah, do share. And if you found this conversation helpful or interesting, please do give us a like and maybe subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Clicking that notification bell means you won't miss our future explorations.
And maybe one final thought to leave you with. Plato puts such a strong emphasis on true knowledge, on that living word graven in the soul, as opposed to just, well, information. In our world, absolutely saturated with written words, digital text, endless data. What does it really mean to be truly well-informed in Plato's sense? Something to ponder, perhaps.